recap Donald Trump's visit to Phoenix and the protesters outside of the police response. Welcome to the Mike Broomhead Show.
Well, I got a message, I got a song. Can I get a witness? Tell me what's going on. I show the people.
We are going to talk about Donald Trump's visit to the Valley in just a few minutes and the police response. We start the show off with something I call the sweep. Now, the sweep is sponsored by my good friends at Zero Res Carpet and Tile Cleaning. Let's start out with the national issues with Donald Trump earlier this week in his speech about a new shift in policy in Afghanistan. What he said was very significant about a policy shift in the things that we're going to do. He would not give out troop information. He would not give out a timeline. He said he doesn't want our enemies to know anything that we are doing. But something specific he said that is a shift in ideology that really the entire world needed to hear. This is what he said.
We are not nation building again. We are killing terrorists.
Now, that's a big shift the world needed to hear, that we are not going to implement a government and turn it over. We are not going to tell the Afghan people how to rule or how to govern. We are going to kill terrorists, and then we are going to leave. Now, that is a big shift, and it really went over well. It was really the first policy that both Republicans on every side of the aisle agreed on. John McCain believed that it was really a good thing. So did Lindsey Graham. So did Mitch McConnell. So did the Speaker of the House. This was something kind of unifying. We're going to talk in a little while about the speech in Phoenix, talk about Charlottesville and the fallout. That will be a whole different conversation. One of the other national news items, and not a good one, is the Vice Admiral Joseph Aucoin, is a three-star commander of the 7th Fleet, has been dismissed. Now, he was set to retire soon, but because of the big issues that happened with the USS John S. McCain, they have now said that's the second kind of crash that's happened. They said they are unique, but they could not be viewed totally separate. He's been removed. It follows 4 accidents involving Navy ships in the Pacific this year. A big story that I don't think is getting any coverage yet, but eventually is going to have to be, is Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the Democrats. Now, she had an IT guy working for her that she kept on the payroll until he was hauled into jail on federal charges. Also, another member of the Congress, a Democrat member of the Congress, tied up with the same family, had $120,000 worth of equipment they wiped off the books because it's been confiscated in this investigation. One of the big questions that was asked is Donald Trump fit to be president? It is a despicable thing to say. You don't have to agree with him. You don't have to like him. You don't have to reelect him. But to question his ability to do the job is, I think, almost treasonous. One of the biggest local stories I think that's happening, and I mean here in the state of Arizona, Channel 12 reporter Brian West went down to Wesley Bolin Plaza at the state capitol and supposed to be doing just a story about monuments down there, the Confederate monuments that have been defaced. So the story was this from the NBC affiliate in Phoenix. Brian went down there and said when he got there, he found a defaced memorial. And they were so shocked that it was painted white and they saw a guy on a bicycle riding away. They called police and gave a description and then did their report. Well, the surveillance video tells a whole different story. You see the news van there, the headlights shine on the back of the memorial, and then 60 seconds after the headlights go on, a guy on a bicycle drives past the side of the van, in front of the headlights, goes around to the front of the memorial with 2 cans of spray paint, and for 4.5 minutes defaces the memorial. Then he gets on his bicycle, rides back past the other side of the van, right in front of the headlights. A minute later, you see the tripod come into the frame and the cameras go to work. It looks as if it was a setup. Now, you can't make that accusation. They've denied it over at Channel 12 in Phoenix, but there is a lot more to this story. We talk about fake news. Is this a young reporter that's trying to make a name for himself? Because it was billed as an exclusive, a defaced memorial. I've got to tell you, there is enough media coverage and enough news to cover if this is what it appears to be. And I encourage you to see the video. And I want to give a shout out to the Phoenix New Times. That's the publication that uncovered this story. And it's just a shame if that was a made-up story. To watch somebody deface a memorial and know that it's happening and not call 911 while it's happening, that is really, really a bad job by a reporter. At this point in taping the show, he still has a job with Channel 12. Channel 12 said that as soon as Brian saw what was going on, he called 911. I don't know if that's true or not. We're going to discuss a couple of things on the show today. First, President Trump's speech and what it meant. Did he do a good job in Phoenix with the lineup of people he had? And secondly, the Phoenix police response to protesters. I thought it was exemplary. The chief said and did all of the right things, and yet 2 elected officials in Arizona are calling for an investigation. All that's coming up in the next segment of the show. We'll get to that in a moment. But before we do, let's talk about my good friends at Zero Res Carpet and Tile Cleaning. Month of August is coming to a close soon. They have got a great special going on that is going to end at the end of this month. And it's the last month this year you can get the special. They know your kids are going back to school. You want to get the house in the right order. And the empowered water they use changes the alkaline level of the water so it attracts dirt like soaps and chemicals do without the harsh effects. 3 rooms of carpet in your home, Zero Resified. Do yourself a favor. Get on their schedule. The good people at Zero Res are going to take good care of you. We'll be back to talk about the Trump visit. Don't go away. I was at the Phoenix Convention Center during the week when President Trump visited Phoenix, and there's a couple of observations. I got there at about 3:30 in the afternoon. The media entrance was on the west side between, I think it was right on 3rd Street, just north of Washington. And there were already many, many people there waiting to get into the event. It was very hot. People were polite. The police were outside. It was very well organized. We made our way into the venue. Now, we didn't realize how big the room was. The room held 19,000 people was the capacity according to the fire marshals. And at some point during the evening, they were told that they were filled to capacity, and there were thousands of people left outside. Now, I can't tell you that there were 19,000 in the room, but I can tell you that the room was very full. It was a great crowd. It was, it really was, it was more like a concert atmosphere. You're hearing from a lot of people in the traditional media that this was an angry mob, and I can promise you there were families there. They had signs, veterans for Trump, women for Trump. Now, whether you like the president's speech or not, I'm telling you what the crowd in Phoenix was like. Going to get to the protesters in just a few moments, but the crowd themselves. They opened up with an invocation. They opened up with the Pledge of Allegiance and the national anthem like they do at all of these events. And then the speakers began to speak. First up was Ben Carson, which I thought was a home run. He was a great speaker. Then he introduces Alveda King. Dr. Alveda King is the niece of Martin Luther King Jr. Now think about the backdrop of what was going on in Charlottesville, Virginia. We know about the division and the white supremacy and this idea that President Trump is a sympathizer. I thought it was a courageous move for Alveda King to be on the stage. I wish President Trump had focused more on that, but again, that's my style difference. I think you could have gone a long way with having her on stage with him. She introduced Franklin Graham, who is the son of the legendary evangelist Billy Graham. He prayed. Then they introduced Mike Pence. And as a little side note, it was so funny to watch the press during this. You're going to hear more about that before the show is over. But they seemed totally disinterested, and the vice president was amazing. Then the president took the stage, and he spent a good part of the beginning of this speech calling out the media, who was sitting right in front of where I was, calling out CNN, and at one point the crowd was chanting, "CNN sucks." It was funny, but the president calling them out for the dishonesty when it came to what he had to say about Charlottesville. I want you to hear what the president said and watch his reaction when he talks about Charlottesville and the dishonest media.
I'm really doing this to show you how damn dishonest these people are.
What he did was he read his quotes. He read what he had been saying the whole time, and he was accurate about it. To give you an idea of the level of disrespect and disdain by the media, you can say what you want about the president if you're on the left and you don't like President Trump. That's fine. But you had somebody from MSNBC, Lawrence O'Donnell, on the show during the president's address, in the middle of it, not waiting until it was over to rebut. In the middle of it, while the president was calling them out, broke in and said the president is lying to you, and he called the president of the United States a liar. Now, if you don't think that's significant, I want you to think, no matter where you stand politically, if anybody over at Fox News had ever done that during an Obama speech or address, in the middle of it, broke from coverage to say that, people would lose their minds. You still must respect the office. He did get into some substance of the speech. He talked about tax reform. He talked about health care reform. And on the health care reform vote, he said, they asked me not to mention any names, talking about, of course, Arizona's Senators McCain and Flake. But being one vote away, and this was where the crowd was very vocal in this give and take, here's what the president said about one vote.
We were just one vote away from victory after 7 years of everybody proclaiming repeal and replace. One vote away.
All right. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that take. And what I mean by that is the skinny repeal, as they called that final version where John McCain made the deciding vote. I didn't like the skinny repeal. It calls in to too small groups of people writing the legislation. I think McCain was right on not voting for the skinny repeal. But I think the senators should have voted for one of the other repeal bills, repeal and forced replacement. One of the loudest exchanges of the night is when the president brought up Sheriff Joe Arpaio and didn't use the word pardon, but this is what he said.
Was Sheriff Joe convicted for doing his job? That's what. He should have had a jury, but you know what? I'll make a prediction. I think he's going to be just fine, okay?
Now, he went on to say, I'm not going to do it tonight because I don't want to cause any controversy, which was very funny, a very funny moment. But he did insinuate that at some point, if the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals does not give Joe Arpaio a new trial of a jury instead of a bench trial with a judge, that a pardon may be forthcoming. So that was a big piece of the event. From my perspective, the President of the United States was on a campaign visit and preaching to the choir to rally the base, telling them to call their senators. I thought the speech was okay. I didn't think that there was what the media called it. He's not unhinged. He was preaching to the choir. When we come back, we're going to talk about the protesters outside. As I exited the Phoenix Convention Center and kind of walked the gauntlet of protesters, how the protesters behaved, how the police responded when it got heated up, and two elected officials in Arizona calling for an investigation that I think is totally unfounded. All that's coming up in just a few moments on the Mike Broomhead Show. I'll be back. Upon exiting the rally at Phoenix Convention Center when the president was there, that we knew that there were going to be a lot of protesters out there, and so did the Phoenix Police Department. They were out there in force. Police Chief Jerry Williams said they will be out there. They will make sure that the people are safe and everybody can express their opinions. I had said earlier in the week on the radio show that I believe that if it's just people from Arizona, for the most part, we're peaceful. It doesn't matter what's happening. We are very passionate about our opinions, but we're not violent. We also have a good rapport with the police department. So people aren't as angry with the police here as they are in other places. So you figure there had to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 25,000 people in that one area when this event ended. As I made my way out of the convention center, you almost had to walk a gauntlet with protesters on both sides, but I never felt unsafe. The Phoenix Police Department did an excellent job of keeping all of the violence to a minimum. Although, I've got to tell you, when I watched what was happening from some of the protesters, they didn't seem like they were upset with the Trump supporters. I watched a group of Trump supporters walk within a foot or two of about 70 protesters on the steps by the convention center. And they had their signs, they held them up and waved them, and the protesters yelled at them and they yelled back. There was no throwing of bottles, there was no throwing of punches, there was no violence, just very vocal, which there's nothing wrong with in who we are in Arizona. But what did seem to be the problem was this, and I think it's the Antifa group. I'm just telling you, I think they call themselves anti-fascists. I think that's a joke. These are violent people. So throughout the course of the afternoon, the police officers in riot gear from Phoenix PD were pelted with water bottles. Well, at the end of this event, as people were coming out and it started to get heated, these protesters, and it may have been a small number of them, began throwing bottles of water at the police. Now, there was a command center in which they were watching video and in contact with the people on the street. And so water bottles were being thrown. The police did not react. They didn't react. And then something lit like a grenade or a smoke grenade or something that they had lit on fire was thrown at the police officers, and we saw smoke. In the command center, they were told, that is not ours. In other words, the police were saying, we did not launch that. Then they said, we are now taking debris. So it wasn't just water bottles. They were being pelted with rocks and other items. That's when they fired tear gas at the crowd. A guy tried to kick that can or kick that back at the police, and he was shot with a pepper ball. Now, one of the big deals about this was because where he was shot in a very painful area. And now the protesters are up in arms. When it was over at a press conference, there was one member of the media that was caught up in the tear gas. And he questioned the police chief on whether or not this was a reasonable use of force. And she said, absolutely, I think it was appropriate. They said they were never warned. The video clearly shows a couple of things. A, the protesters acted first with the smoke grenade or the tear gas, whatever it was first launched by the protesters. Secondly, what happened was the response by the police was very, very measured. They were warned to disperse, and they didn't. Well, here's the problem. A Tempe city councilman, his name is David Shapira. David Shapira was with his wife, and according to him, they were passing out water both to the police and to the protesters, and they got caught up in the tear gas. Well, I understand that upsets them, except it's not the police that's at fault. The protesters were throwing rocks and bottles of water, and they also launched the smoke grenade first. Ruben Gallego is a congressman from Phoenix. Ruben Gallego calling for an investigation. Both Mr. Gallego and Mr. Shapira need to go back and watch the video where the protesters acted first. The City of Phoenix Police Department, that video of how they handled all of those people, as spirited as that debate was, is A, a testament to the people of Phoenix who don't get violent right out of the gate, but B, should be used as a training video for police agencies all over the country. For two elected officials in Arizona to launch into an attack and say this should be investigated, that the police were somehow heavy-handed, shows you some people will never be satisfied with the police departments they have. They should be on board saying our people or the people that were protesting were the ones who acted inappropriately. And all the damage that were done, well, there were 5 people arrested. One of them was a juvenile that's not being identified. But 4 arrests were made. Only 3 of them were protest-related. The other one was an outstanding warrant. And one of those protesters had a gun on his hip and was told by the police, do not reach for that gun. And he did. Did they shoot him? No, they didn't. They wrestled the gun away from him so there was no gunfire in the crowd, got him on the ground, disarmed him, and took him to jail. He's been charged with a bunch of felonies. This was a great job by the Phoenix Police Department, an exemplary job. They should be thanked. We all should be sending emails to say when the entire country was watching Phoenix, Arizona after what happened in Charlottesville, we should be proud of the way Arizona behaves. We should also be proud of the way our police departments behave. Thank you to Chief Williams and for all the officers in the Phoenix Police Department and the way they conducted themselves that day, and even to the protesters and the people at the rally, how they conducted themselves peacefully, as spirited as it was. Just my take on all of this. I was there. I saw it. I'm telling you firsthand, it was the fault of the protesters. I'll be back to close out the show. Broomhead's Best, hashtag this. Don't go away. Welcome back. It's time for one of my favorite parts of the show. We call it From Arizona for America. It's our way to congratulate and thank the fine Arizona men and women who have recently graduated from boot camp and are now serving in our country's military. So please join me in honoring Airman Iran Nieto from Blue Ridge Unified School District in Lakeside, Airman First Class Kelly Coolbaugh Roscoe from Apollo High School in Glendale, and Airman First Class Sierra Wall from Sunrise Mountain High in Peoria. For a list of more of our friends and neighbors that are from Arizona for America, you can go to the Mike Broomhead page at aztv.com. We'll be back in a minute with Broomhead's Best and hashtag this. Don't go away. Now it's time for the part of the show I call Broomhead's Best. This week, it's Grand Canyon University. Their sports program now joins the Western Athletic Conference, and they are a Division I program. That's got to be great for the state of Arizona. Having crosstown rivals with ASU, who fought it every step of the way, is still a good thing. Congratulations, Lopes up. Good job, guys. Now it's time for hashtag this. This week, hashtag this is hashtag crossword reporter. Chip Reed, CBS News. He's the national correspondent. I sat right next to him at the Donald Trump event. I snapped a picture. Chip Reed, while he was sitting there, the Vice President of the United States is speaking. He's giving his speech. I'm watching the vice president, and I look over, and what is the national correspondent from CBS doing while the vice president's speaking? A crossword puzzle. The picture's on my Twitter account. It's unbelievable. So congratulations, Chip. You're our This Week #this. We'll be back in a moment to close out the show. Don't go away. President Trump's visit to the Valley, he talked about Congress and their need to do their jobs, which I agree with. There needs to be a working relationship between Mitch McConnell, who leads the Senate. He's got to get President Trump's agenda through the United States Senate. I had Jeff Flake on my show earlier in the week, and we talked about that relationship. He talked about where he agrees with the president on the deregulation, which really helps Arizona, but he disagrees about NAFTA. He disagrees about tone. There's agreement and disagreement to go around, but in the end, what's at stake? If we don't get tax reform done, how is that going to hammer the American people and any potential for Republicans to retain control? The fact is, they need to get something done. When it comes to Obamacare, it's imploding all over the country. When is something going to get done there? In the end, the idea of a do-nothing Congress keeps perpetuating itself. They've got 12 legislative days in the Senate before the end of the fiscal year. Let's see what they get done. We'll be back next week. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next Saturday night. Have a great week. God bless.
Get more of Mike Broomhead on Facebook, Twitter, and of course weekday mornings from 6 to 10 on News Talk 550 KFYI.